How many of you are sustainability officers here, work on your sustainability strategy? Excellent, excellent. So we're going to hear from a very diverse panel. We have from tech to water to beverages. Please come join me on the stage. So I have the pleasure to introduce Emma Stewart, the Chief Sustainability Officer with Netflix. Hello. Good morning. We have Marta Stevenson, who is a Senior Advisor with the Science-Based Targets Initiative. Hi. Good morning. Hi, we have Alan Chen, who is the Vice President and General Manager of DuPont. Hello, Alan. And finally, we have Jim Andrew, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer with PepsiCo. Hi. Hello. Excellent. So I hope everybody's mics work. We're going to structure today's discussion around 2 points: plans and their implementations. So let's start with plans. Let's start with what are 3 main points of your sustainability plans, your net zero plans for Emma, for Alan, and for Jim.
Shall I go first?
Please.
I have no idea if this is working.
Yep.
Yes? Excellent. Good morning, everyone. So we have really 2 parts to our Net Zero Plus Nature program. The first is a science-based target, which means we've put our company on a carbon diet in line with climate science. So we've publicly committed to halve our absolute emissions by 2030, and that's been third-party validated by the Science-Based Targets Initiative. In addition to that, we have committed to protect and restore carbon sinks, starting with nature's carbon sinks, which are tried and tested at stabilizing the climate and have been doing so long before humans showed up. And to do so, we invest in particular, forests above and below water to retain and restore carbon in the soil. And that is really the 2 components: to reduce and then to protect and restore. And how do we get this reduction flywheel going? We use something called the Oed Framework, which is our little internal terminology for optimize, electrify, decarbonize. Because, as the previous speaker said, the cheapest emissions reductions and certainly the cheapest energy is the energy or emissions that you don't need. So optimizing is always the first step and all too often the most overlooked. So just in the past year, we have audited over 30% of our total square footage for productions and for our offices and found energy efficiency opportunities there. And then electrification is key, in part because electric motors are just more energy efficient and they're more easily decarbonized. So we've been looking to electrify vehicles, which are a big part of making film and television, it turns out, as well as our corporate offices and liquid fuels. And then lastly, we decarbonize what we can't optimize or electrify. And we do that by finding alternatives like sustainable aviation fuel. So we co-founded with a number of other companies the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance in order to create these proof of concept value chains for getting this drop-in fuel, which is 80% lower carbon from a life cycle standpoint, into jets, whether they are jets that are used to bring people on location to shoot our great national parks with President Obama, or simply to move our employees from one office to the next. So hopefully that's easy to remember. It's a science-based target plus a net zero commitment using an OED framework.
Fantastic. Thank you, Emma. Alan, how about the water sector?
Can you hear me okay? Okay. I guess good morning, and first of all, really appreciate having the opportunity to share our thoughts on what we do in our sustainability journey in DuPont, especially in the DuPont water business. This morning, I'll share a little bit unique perspective on net zero and also greenhouse gas and so forth, sustainability. In our business, we wrestle between energy and water every day. Basically, the energy usage and water usage every day. So, on the one hand, and we enable our shareholder and stakeholder on on how to optimize water, but at the same time, how to do it by not putting in more energy. So the following 3 points, I think, is going to be a little bit different than maybe some of the speakers that you all heard this morning. First of all, we believe the water and the greenhouse gas emission has always been closely linked. You can't separate the two. And why do I say that? Just imagine as our planet warms, right, we're feeling the impact of the climate change through changes in water. Just look at the news, right? When we experience the climate change, what are some of the initial signs that we see? Rising in frequency and the severity of droughts, flooding, sea level rise, and other phenomena that put freshwater resources in danger, at risk. So every degree our planet warms, our water resources become more hospitable to virus and bacteria, which is creating a major issue. Second of all, if you look at our communities and everybody that we talked to today, right, from drinking water municipalities to industrial water users, the focus on sustainability becomes their top priority, like many of you sitting here. Many of our customers actually want to be able to process more wastewater and purify more drinking water without negatively impacting climate change. Many of them, like you, are working towards the net zero goals. That's why the role of water sector is more important than ever. Innovating, and you'll hear more I say about this later on, in numerous ways to purify, conserve, reuse, transport, store, and analyze the precious water resources is going to be critical. But we must do this sustainably. In other words, you cannot really solve one problem by creating another. And the carbon cost of clean water, many of you may not know, should not do more harm to our climate than our current and future water supplies. That's my second point. So lastly, I will also encourage many of us here, as companies consider how they become a strong net zero company, I really urge you to think about two things. First, to consider the energy intensity of water use as a key lever. Remember, 40% of generated electricity goes into water production and treatment. And second, the importance of solving for water and carbon simultaneously. As I mentioned, we cannot solving a problem by creating another. This mindset is so critical as new solutions are sought after and implemented toward the potential to reach the net zero carbon and water at the same time.
Great.
Thank you,
Alan. All right, Jim, on to you, a very hard to abate sector.
Great, thanks, Anna. Like Emma, we're big believers in science-based targets, and we also have a science-based target, net zero by 2040, down 75% in scope 1 and 2 for 2030, and then also 40% on our scope 3. So, which for us is very important because we're 93% in our scope 3. So that's very fundamental. Most people think of PepsiCo as a beverage company, and yes, of course, we make beverages, but we're actually an even bigger food company. We're about 55+% food. And because of that, the three main parts of our net zero program, which for us is really a fundamental transformation. What we've really done is said the future of PepsiCo is our transformation program that puts sustainability squarely at the center of it. And what I get up every day worrying about is what we call PepsiCo Positive. And it's really about how do we work within planetary boundaries to create value for all of our stakeholders and to really have planet and people fundamentally, a part of everything we do. And so for us, there's three big pieces for it. The first is regenerative agriculture. We've said that we'll spread that to 7 million acres by 2030, which is about the size of our entire agricultural footprint. And related to that will be 100% sustainably sourced, and we will improve the livelihoods of 250,000 farmers and their families. So regenerative agriculture is a big piece. The second piece is accelerate the move that's already underway to much more sustainable packaging. And that, again, is a very big piece. And that's recycled content, that's refill and reuse. That's a whole set of things around that. And then the third piece is 100% renewable electricity by 2030. Again, like Emma said, it's a real opportunity. We're already 100% for both our manufacturing and non-manufacturing in 13 countries, including the US, our largest market. And we've got well underway across them. Now, when we talk later, there's some policy issues in some of these countries, but really moving forward on 100%, and our full global system, including our bottlers, our co-packers, our co-manufacturers, will be 100% renewable by 2040. So 3 big pieces: science-based targets for sure, and then for us, it's regenerative agriculture, accelerating the move to more sustainable packaging, and in many cases, just removing packaging from our products. And then third, 100% renewable electricity.
Excellent, thank you. Great 3 points. So Marta, you have an overview of the different plans that SBTI works with. Could you give us a sense of what does it mean to have a strong net zero plan?
Sure. So, well, 90% of the global economy, am I on? Can you hear me?
Mic check.
Mic check. I think you're good, yeah.
So, while 90% of the global economy is committed to net zero, not all of these plans are equal. So the Science-Based Targets Initiative in October of 2021 published the corporate net zero standard. And within this standard, there's 3 key features that I'd like to highlight for all of you. The first being that we align with the Ipcc definition of net zero, which is deep decarbonization first, and then a balancing at the end. And so per the standard, companies have to, on average, decarbonize about 90%, and then balance those remaining emissions, neutralize those with high integrity removals. Slightly different for the forest, land, and agriculture sector, which is decarbonization of about 72%. The second feature within the standard is really nesting a near-term target within a longer-term target. So as we were developing it, we heard a lot of criticism, particularly from some of the more activist organizations, that what if companies wait until 2040 before they do anything? And so we had to make sure that we embed that near-term SBTI target, which is really kind of the bread and butter of what we've done over the past 6 years, within the net zero standard. So companies have to have a 5 to 10-year target to match also with their longer-term 20 to 30-year target. And then the last piece I feel doesn't get talked about as much, but the way that we do the modeling within the SBTI, we choose only those pathways within the Ipcc database that align with the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that's really critical, particularly for companies, to make sure that you're delivering on your full ESG portfolio, water outcomes and others, that when you align with the Science-Based Targets Initiative definition of net zero, you're also aligning with the SDGs.
Thank you, perfect. I want to remind participants, please place your questions on Slido. Just type that in your browser, and the code is SUS Week, S-U-S Week. We would really love to get your questions. Great. So what are some levers that you use in your plans? What portions of your emissions are you targeting? Have you used SBTI? We heard about that in your plans. What makes your plans material and important and effective? If we could start again, yes.
So what we found when we ran Netflix's carbon footprint was that we are in fact an entertainment company. Most of our emissions come from the making of film and television, about 60%. And so that's our biggest lever. Mm-hmm. About 37% come from our corporate offices and operations, and then about 5% from the data center providers we rely upon, like Amazon Web Services or an Open Connect network to bring you the film and television shows locally on your service. So the big focus is on our productions. And the good news is there's lots of low-hanging fruit, I guess. That's good news, in the sense that most of the emissions come from fuel and electricity, and in particular, liquid fuels used for production vehicles. These can be passenger vans and passenger vehicles, but also 5-ton, 10-ton trucks, stake beds, tractors. You have to move a lot of things around, it turns out, to make a movie. And so we've really been working to pilot electrifying those vehicles where they are available. In the past year, we've managed to pilot 70 different such vehicles. And we're talking directly to the transportation service providers, because we do not own these fleets, and encouraging them to push on the OEMs to get these medium-duty and heavy-duty vehicles out to the market faster. We're perfectly well served with passenger vehicles, and increasingly you're seeing those show up on the screen, but we really need these medium and heavy-duty vehicles in order to squeeze the diesel out of our footprint. And then secondly, we're trying wherever possible to reimagine the making of film and television, which has traditionally relied heavily on diesel generators. Whether it's on the set or on location, the instinct has always been bring in a Jenny. And it turns out that these things are quite loud, the fuels are quite expensive, and that has serious implications for things like noise pollution on set. And so the real goal here is to work with cast, crew, and unions, and the labor force, as well as the makers of alternatives like clean mobile batteries, hybrid generators, and fuel cells. If anyone's seen Bridgerton or Lupin, you'll be happy to know we piloted 2 fuel cells on those sets, and in fact, I believe that was the first ever done in the country of France. Omar Sy himself was quite pleased with that. So these are the sorts of things that we're experimenting with, and we're trying to be very open about it, because decarbonizing the entertainment sector is certainly not one company's job, and we can't do it without our peers. And so that's really been our focus.
Fascinating, thank you. Alan and Jim, Jim? Yeah, go ahead.
Let me come at it, maybe add a slightly different nuance. Again, for us, 93% Scope 3. So right. We're doing a tremendous amount. We just had a supplier conference 2 weeks ago. We had 2,300 suppliers from around the world. We're active in 200 countries. So for us, our scale, we're almost $80 billion. Our complexity, we're the entire value chain, everywhere from farm to, package at your house, and everything in between we do. The chief sustainability officer said they have the largest vehicle fleet in America. We have one of the largest private fleets, depending on the day, the second or third largest private fleet. So we're looking at all that, but fundamentally it's about Scope 3, and let me just maybe highlight a couple, because I know that's an issue for a lot of people. We're involved with a number of our peer companies in a program called Supplier Leadership on Climate Transitions with Guidehouse, a very well-respected group we work a lot with. And that's really about how do you set targets and how do you take action if you're a supplier. And we run a school, and we're in our second or third class, and we put 100 companies through it. And it's a very intensive thing where they really learn how. The second, around renewable electricity that Emma and I were talking about, we have PepsiCo Positive Renew, which is a program that's designed to both educate suppliers about renewable electricity, but then allow them to join and in a virtual PPA be able to aggregate supply. So we heard earlier about demand aggregation. Any of you who've ever done a PPA know how complicated they can be. There is a lot of heavy lifting on the legal side. Our scale, we can use that, and then we can allow people literally plug and play into it. So the very smallest suppliers sign up, and all of a sudden they're using renewable power. So it's a great benefit. We have a sustainability action center, which is tools for our suppliers, our bottlers, our co-manufacturers, including a materiality assessment. Because a lot of companies don't really know where they stand. How good am I? What do I need to do? And so it's really something that allows them to go through the journey. And then the last thing I would just highlight is for Positive Agriculture, we just launched last week our Positive Agriculture Supplier Playbook, which is really about how do you bring regenerative agriculture to your farm, to your supply base. And that's something that is so important. But it's really about how do you drive positive outcomes, not only for carbon, but for water usage, as we heard, for biodiversity, for farmer livelihoods, and for soil health. And so those are just 4 things that we're doing to really address the Scope 3 piece, which is something that's so important, for most companies. So we're really trying to lever that piece, in addition to all the things that Emma mentioned for our own operations.
Exactly. Supplier support is at the core of this. I see that we have some questions, and Edward offered to read some of them. Thank you.
A few questions from the audience. First one is, what technologies and tools do you use to measure, track, and report your sustainability efforts? Is there a standard you're moving towards?
So the question is, what technologies and
trackers and tools.
What technologies and tools do you use to measure, track, and report your sustainability efforts? Is there a standard you're moving towards?
Who would like to take it, Alan?
Maybe I'll start. I mean, clearly, especially in our company, which we work with a lot of scientists. I mean, we would definitely go with the science-based target, right? That's always going to be a reference point for us. And basically, if you look at how we're doing right now, there are really three fronts there, right? I mean, and we have tools in place and we have standards in place. But in my mind, there are really three aspects. On the one hand, we are looking at, I think, just like Netflix, right? We're looking at our current asset because a lot of the operation is really around optimization on energy usage, optimization of water usage. And we find a very clear, direct correlation between water consumptions and energy consumption in all our asset. So we develop those tools to see that correlation and see where we can really optimize what we do. The secondly, in my mind, is after looking at where you have, that's more looking back, right? It's really about the forward-looking, right? So to me, and I like what David said, the first speaker, about implementation plus, right? A lot of this is putting a 2030 goal in a sustainability report is one thing. How do you tangibly get there? I think is something else. So to me, is in a private sector is a very proactive investment and capital planning with that consideration. For example, whenever we develop new capacity expansion, we have to consider alternative energy. For example, solar energy rather than a fossil fuel, right? So how can we continue to reduce the footprint, continue to reduce the consumption of fossil fuels so that we can basically use greener energy? So that's the second part. The last part I would say that maybe a little bit on the tool and some of the measurement is, with what we do, we leverage our learning, especially in our process with our clients and our customer and community, quite frankly, or a policymaker. Because to me, that's really the power. Continue to look at what you can do is one thing, but for example, for us, we have over like a 15 asset around the globe. Even though if you do it perfectly, that's only 15 asset that you can optimize. But how do you really leverage those tools to the client, to people that have the same challenges as we do, and that's really we are out there doing every day. So,
thank you, Alan. Marta?
Yeah, maybe just to highlight something about the forest, land, and agriculture sector. So the SBTI will be publishing this standard relatively soon. We've been working on it for a couple years, and very exciting. But the data around this has posed a really significant issue, and we've had to also work with WRI to develop the Greenhouse Gas Protocol standard on land emissions and removals as a partner project here, so we can deliver both, because this is 22% of global emissions that have not been counted before. Biogenic emissions from land use change and also land management have not been included. And so we're having to really rewrite the standard that gives guidance on how to account for this, and also work with many of the database developers, with USDA and others who have this agricultural data or have this forestry data, to figure out how can we format this in a way and get it ready. At the same time, using remote sense data for those places where we don't have specific supply chain data, to make sure that we can at least start looking at things at a meaningful geographic scale, because these emissions are spatially explicit, to make sure that we can actually get to this type of accounting. So I just wanted to acknowledge it's probably a couple-year road till we'll be able to do this well, but the data infrastructure is certainly on the move and in place to catch up.
Yeah, the agriculture sector is challenging in that way. Having done a few projects myself. Yes, Ed, there are more questions.
Yes, a question for SBTI. Would you recommend for companies with large carbon footprints, would you recommend them to wait to validate a net zero target, or until the flag emissions guidance is finalized?
I mean, if you are able to use the current standards that are out there to draft your inventory from your flag emissions, then we'll start accepting those applications as early as July this summer. But you might want to wait, particularly if you're a forestry company, you would wait a little bit longer until the Greenhouse Gas Protocol is finalized, because there are still some significant open questions on how that standard is going to land.
Great. Yeah, one more.
Another question. What role does Netflix play in the public education to drive net zero culture change required to make policy goals possible? And for everyone as well.
Hopefully a big one, though we wouldn't call it net zero on the screen. It's only catchy in rooms like this. So one of the things we did in advance of COP26 in partnership with the UK government was we put out the first collection of green titles, forgive the jargon, but these are titles, film and television shows that truly shine an overt light on sustainability challenges or opportunities. And that proved successful in the way the COP organizers described it, creating some cultural air cover for the negotiators who were headed to Glasgow. So we tried again this year. Last month, well, now April, we put out the Earth Collection. This was over 170 different film and television shows from every genre. Yes, there were nature documentaries, including Our Great National Parks, the brand new series by President Barack Obama. But there were also rom-coms and cooking shows and kids and family animation and political dramas. Just last week, we launched Borgen, Power and Glory, out of the Nordics, which is a wonderful series if you haven't seen it. And this particular series deals with the politics of oil extraction in Greenland and how it exacerbates the political dynamics and the indigenous rights issues between those two countries. This makes for rich, fertile ground for storytelling. As Adam McKay, the writer and director of Don't Look Up, put it, this is the epic story of all stories. And so when society is experiencing something quite so convulsive as an energy transition coupled with a changing climate, it really is in our best interest, commercially and socially, to reflect that accurately on screen. And we're hearing from our customers that they want more of that.
Great.
If I could just maybe piggyback on that, as a company that's deeply into the popular culture, one of the things that we see real opportunities and responsibility is have our brands lean in. So Pepsi brand has a very long-standing partnership with the NFL, which is the most popular sports property in America, was just recently renewed. And we use those assets, players, teams, stadiums, events, to communicate around things like recycling. Every time a bottle or something is recycled, it's a tremendous impact not only on the plastics issue, but also on the greenhouse gas issue. And so when you have NFL players talking about what is good recycling and the importance of doing it, that's a powerful, powerful platform. When you have Lay's, the world's largest food brand, talking about potatoes grown locally, biodigesting the peelings in the UK around fertilizer. I mean, those things you can reach. We touch 1 billion consumers a day, occasions. And so as Emma said, I think any way that any of us can lean in and communicate to consumers is a tremendous opportunity to be able to help, because we need everybody. We need everybody and everything to be making big decisions, little decisions to move this forward.
Yeah. And that's a great segue into the implementation part. So you're reaching consumers as well. There's some recognition of the value of sustainability. Can we talk about the cost effectiveness of some of these measures? We heard about energy efficiency, optimization. Have you actually put a number on all your efforts? Are they bringing some value to the company as well for these sustainability efforts? Who wants to? I think Alan's eager to jump in.
Let me
please.
jump on in. I'm very passionate about this topic. Ultimately, to me, everybody know, greenhouse gas is bad. Everybody know that wastewater is causing a lot of people sickness. But at the same time, why are we still struggling? Right? It's because we also have a lot of other stakeholders that we need to satisfy. So ultimately, it's really looking at the cost-effective way. But if you look at it, I mean, why we are still struggling so much? But to me, the answer is really boils down to the innovation. Because without innovation, I mean, we can continue to drive some of these agenda and some of these important topics that we talk about today. But at the end of the day, how many of us at some point got stopped because one of the board member and the board saying that, is this really cost effective? Every day I'm looking at some of the investment decision. How do we make choices, right? To me, that's what innovation is about. So to me, all of us, especially in the private sector, have a lot of responsibility to continue to drive innovation. So on the one hand, we will continue to drive, cost-effective way to meet some of these very challenging sustainability goals. But at the same time, because of the innovation, we can continue to bring value to some of the stakeholders that we're dealing with every day.
Great.
Yeah.
Martha, do you have some experience on this, how to convince companies this has returned to it, economic return?
Sure. I mean, I would say more in my hat as working for the World Wildlife Fund. I think something I'm really excited, in terms of strategies, corporate climate target setting is really good to motivate action within supply chains. But when you get to these types of activities, either in hard-to-abate sectors like we heard about before, or stopping deforestation, which is a big thorny problem that is not caused solely by commodity expansion. A significant amount of it is caused by subsistence farming, infrastructure. So when you're looking at those types of snake pits, you really need to get the right group of people together to figure out how to do this, and that's why we've emerged with different approaches like jurisdictional approaches or multi-actor coalitions that help us really break through some of these thorny areas. And so I think while individual corporate action can get you part of the way, it's really this next step is going to be breaking through these difficult barriers together and figuring out how we can really solve some of these problems.
Great. Jim or Emma, anything to add on the value? Have you been able to measure some of the value you've added through the sustainability work?
Well, we're just getting started in terms of understanding our customers' appreciation of these topics. So in 2020, we did a very conservative analysis of how many households had watched at least one overtly green title on our platform, and the result was 160 million. You can multiply that by the average size of a household to get to the number of eyeballs reached. And that's at least one, right? And then our more recent customer research has shown that the global polls in terms of public opinion are spot on. Our research confirmed what you see from Ipsos Mori or from Pew or from Yale University, which is about 80% of the global population across every demographic, gender divide, partisan divide, and generational divide feel they are deeply concerned or alarmed about climate change and would like to see brands like ours stepping up to do something about it. And so for Netflix, what that means is leaning on what we like to think we do well, which is supporting our creative partners in telling hugely entertaining and hopefully also enriching stories. And so that's where partnerships like the one we had with filmmaker Adam McKay for Don't Look Up really come to bear. That film broke multiple Netflix records, including becoming the second most watched film in history. It was on the top 10 in 90 different countries, which is nigh impossible for a comedy. And it took a comedic treatment to climate inaction, which many climate scientists told us was cathartic. They saw themselves on screen. And they actually came out in droves writing op-eds in support of a Hollywood film. So I like to joke that my job is to make the elephants of East Kenya famous and to make climate scientists cool and dinner table conversation.
Excellent. Jim?
Yeah, I'm a business guy. I grew up through businesses. I've run multi-billion-dollar businesses, and I've always had a passion for sustainability. I'm a scuba diver, but really fundamentally my job every day is to wake up and how do we make that business case and how do we drive sustainability into the business. It's not sustainability over here and the business over here. It is one and the same. So when we give long-term guidance to the street, the costs that we believe for the sustainability transition that we need to make, and because it's our strategy, right? It's in those numbers. When we look at where consumers are going, and we're obviously a highly consumer-oriented company, that's what we're basing it on. There are things today that are already very cost-effective, and there's other things that through coalitions and partnerships we believe can become much more cost-effective. But fundamentally, it's how do we make business cases work? And if they don't work, well, a big part of my job is to go figure out how to make them work. Whether that's through innovation or partnerships or creative approaches to consumers, whatever the case may be, because then you're rolling a ball down a hill as opposed to pushing it up a hill. And so that to me is really how do we make it core to what we or any other company does as a part of their day-to-day business.
Yeah. I want to say my career as environmental economist has been about climate is good business, so I hear you. We have some questions and we have exactly 7 minutes left, so let's hear.
A general question to all of you. Are you leveraging internal carbon pricing?
Could you repeat? I didn't hear the first part of the question.
General question to the full panel. Are you leveraging internal carbon pricing? And if so, how?
Internal carbon pricing.
We have an internal carbon price.
Please.
Yeah, we have an internal carbon price, and we use it on a set of key things where there are decisions that can be made because we want to bring increased visibility to that. It's not every single thing, but it's for key decisions. The other thing is we have a program called BTIP, which is our Business Travel inset program. And there we actually levy a tax on every flight. I took the train here, but on every flight that anybody makes, and we then use that money, comes directly out of the business unit and goes into regenerative farming agricultural practices in our supply chain to offset those emissions. So we have both a shadow price and then a hard internal price. And it's about how do you increase visibility, increase awareness, and start to get people thinking about it in terms of business decisions.
All right. Alan or Emma, something to add? Okay. All right. Next question, yeah.
Can you comment on the new rule proposed by the SEC that will require companies to significantly increase their reporting on climate risk?
I can take it. We're already subject to such reporting requirements as a global company. So there's certain countries that already ask us to pull our carbon footprint for that country, to disclose the transition plan, and to report against the progress against our targets. So we understand that this is the trajectory, and we're ready to meet it.
Great.
Same for us. I mean, as long as we are operating at a global level, right? I mean, we this is something that, and quite frankly, it's something that we have to do internally, right? Anyway, I mean, and that additional requirement at a global level is just kind of make this consistent with what we're trying to do. So,
great. All right. Yeah. Next question.
And another one: what sort of size of teams do you have in house to do all your tracking and reporting across your companies?
Yeah.
Just tracking and reporting, or implementation?
And implementation.
It depends on how you cut it, but I would say it's in the hundreds, because we really try to embed the functions within the core business units where the emissions lie. So we have hundreds of people working on this in any given day. It may not say so on their business card, but it's part of their job responsibilities.
for us, the same way. I mean, we definitely have the corporate function on the sustainability side, which we have a big team of people. But at the end of the day, I think to June's point, right, we're running a business. So, for example, in my business, we actually have a sustainability officer, which have a team to look at it, very specific to, again, some of our business decision on a daily, quarterly, and an annual basis.
Great.
I would prefer to have as few people as possible on reporting and as many people as possible on doing.
Right.
And so as these things come out, we would hope that the various entities would coalesce around a common set of standards that would allow all of us to have the maximum amount of people making things better, and the reporting be fair, transparent, aspirational, achievable, and also efficient.
Yes, efficient reporting. Final question is, we have 3 minutes left. What advice would you have for companies just starting on their sustainability journey? 1 or 2 points.
And maybe I'll start first. There are really 2 things. One is, again, I will really encourage all of us here, do not silo our view on a particular item, right? Because to me, sustainability is a biosystem, it's an ecosystem. We need to be making sure that we're not solving one problem by creating another. And the second thing to me, I think, is intuitive, right? I think first thing is have a plan. Let's say 2030, 2040, 2050, but having a plan and reporting every quarter is not gonna get us there. It has to be something very tangible that we're doing proactively, maybe down to an operating unit level, because there are things that you can do today. There are a lot of things that you can do reporting, doing, and planning. Because, by the way, a lot of these things is going to be very strategic. You need to plan ahead of time. So you need to make sure that we do have resources allocated on the planning side. So.
Great. Marta, any advice from you for companies?
Sure. I think we've all been studying this issue for a very long time. There are a lot of quick wins, as Emma said, and a lot of no regrets action. So I would say, focus on the doing first. Go for the implementation and worry about kind of catching up on the measurement and the reporting later.
Great. Emma, Jim.
I'd say the same thing that we tell thousands of suppliers, really 3 things. 1, set an SBTI target and start reporting against it. 2, get onto renewable electricity as much as you can, as fast as you can. And 3, move now.
Yeah.
Move now.
Move now.
The direction of travel is clear, even if some of the details still need to be worked out.
Great.
That's well said. I'll give you one example from another public company I worked for, where our sustainability solutions team often got confused for the sales team, not because we were salesy, but because we knew the customer better than any other group in the company. So know thy customer sounds like MBA School 101, but it's often lost on people that the better you know the customer, the easier the business case is to make. And then for Netflix, where we've actually only had a centralized sustainability office for just over a year and a half now, it's to move fast and ground everything in science. So whenever we're confronted with a question, our touchstone is to go back to our scientific advisors, to read the journals and the peer-reviewed studies to understand, are we doing the right thing? Are we staying honest as to the science? But don't let that paralyze us from moving fast, because it's clear that that is a necessity.
Great. Thank you. I would like to wrap up here. We definitely have a move now message. We've heard about the science-based targets, its importance. Optimize processes is one of the cost-effective ways. Think about scope 3, sometimes a very far-reaching and most, what contributes most to emissions. The agricultural challenges, and we heard about partnerships to break barriers and also contributing to a cultural shift in our work. Thank you so much for your attention, and thank you to the panel. It was a great discussion.